A woman whispered, "I love you," on my husband's phone. When I recognized the voice, my whole body froze. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Claire Thompson. I'm in my late 30s and I've been married to Daniel for 12 years. We've built a life together. 2 kids, a home in the suburbs, years of memories both good and bad. I always thought we were solid. Sure, marriage has its ups and downs, but I believed in us. I believed in him. One evening, Daniel was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally I never snoop. I trusted him. But something in my gut told me to look, and I wish I hadn't. There was a voicemail notification. I pressed play expecting maybe a coworker or a friend. Instead, a soft, almost breathless voice filled the room. "I love you," she whispered. My heart stopped. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I misheard? But then it hit me like a knife to the chest. I knew that voice. It wasn't some stranger, some faceless woman I could hate from a distance. It was Rachel. My best friend. The woman who stood beside me on my wedding day, who held my hand through both pregnancies, who called me her sister. I felt sick. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up. My legs gave out and I sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in my hand, shaking all over. My mind raced in circles. Oh, it couldn't be Rachel. She loved my kids, she came over for Sunday dinners, she laughed with me on the phone almost every night. But the voicemail was right there. Her voice was clear. Intimate. Loving. I replayed it 3 more times, like torturing myself would change the truth. Each time the sound of her whisper cut deeper. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Cold sweat on my neck, hands trembling, a lump in my throat so big I couldn't swallow. Every memory of Rachel rushed back, but now it all felt poisoned. Every time she hugged me, was she hugging him too? Every time she told me how lucky I was she secretly mocking me? I didn't know what to believe anymore. My heart wanted to deny it, to cling to the idea that it was a mistake, some kind of sick joke. But my gut told me the truth. Daniel wasn't just lying to me. Rachel was lying too. The 2 people I trusted most were stabbing me in the back, and I was standing there with the knife still buried inside me. I remember sitting frozen, phone still in my palms, staring at nothing. The house was quiet except for the sound of the shower running. Just a few feet away, my husband was singing to himself, completely unaware that his world had just crashed into mine. And I sat there broken, trying to decide if I was strong enough to face what I already knew. That was the night my life changed. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I just sat there, empty, feeling like my chest had been cracked open. And as much as I wanted to deny it, I couldn't unhear that voicemail. Rachel's voice kept echoing in my head. "I love you." It was only 2 little words, but they tore apart 12 years of marriage and decades of friendship in an instant. And in that moment I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I met Daniel when I was 24. It was at a small cafe near campus where I worked part-time. He walked in with a smile that lit up the whole place, and he ordered a coffee he didn't even drink because he said he only came in to talk to me. Back then I thought it was the sweetest thing. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. Within a few months, we were inseparable, spending long nights talking about our futures, holding hands like nothing else mattered. He proposed to me under a big oak tree where we used to sit after our classes, and I didn't even hesitate to say yes. It felt right. I thought I had found someone who would always protect my heart. When we stood at the altar, I wasn't just marrying a man. I believed I was marrying my best friend. And Rachel was right there beside me, standing as my maid of honor, holding my bouquet when my hands shook with excitement. The first years of marriage were beautiful. We rented a small apartment with creaky floors, and though we didn't have much, we had each other. Our first daughter, Emily, was born 2 years later. Daniel cried harder than I did in the delivery room. He kept kissing my forehead and saying he couldn't believe we made something so perfect together. Our son Noah came 3 years after that. Those were the years I felt most certain about us, when family photos filled the walls, when bedtime stories and messy dinners made me feel like our love had built something solid. But somewhere along the way cracks started showing, cracks I chose not to see. Daniel began staying late at work. At first he explained it away: deadlines, projects, a new boss who demanded more. I accepted it because I wanted to believe him. Then came the business trips. Quick overnight ones at first, then weekends away. I'd pack his bags, kiss him goodbye and tell him to drive safe, never letting myself ask why his voice sounded distant on the phone at night. There were other things too. The way he started keeping his phone face down on the table. The way he'd step outside to take calls, lowering his voice when I came too close. Once I caught him smiling at a text, and when I asked, he brushed it off as a joke from a coworker. I let it go, convincing myself that every marriage goes through rough patches, that I was just being paranoid. And Rachel, she was always there through it all. We met back in college, long before Daniel came into my life. She and I shared dorm rooms, study sessions, late-night secrets. She was the one who helped me pick out my wedding dress, who held my hair back at my bachelorette party, who promised she'd always be family no matter what. When Emily was born, I asked her to be the godmother. It felt natural. She was more like a sister than a friend. Looking back now, I can't stop replaying the small moments. Times Rachel offered to pick up Daniel when his car supposedly broke down. Times she stayed behind after dinner to help him with dishes, while I tucked the kids into bed. Times she complimented him, brushing it off as a joke when I teased her about it. All those tiny pieces that seemed harmless then now feel like evidence I refuse to see. I sit and ask myself over and over, how long has this been going on right under my nose? Were they laughing at me behind my back? Were all those nights I waited up with cold dinner on the table really just excuses for them to be together? I don't know the answers, and maybe I never will. What I do know is that the foundation of my trust has started to crumble. The man I built a life with, the friend I trusted like family, both of them were holding secrets that could shatter me. Every smile, every memory, every word now feels tainted. And though I want to cling to what we once had, I can feel the ground beneath me giving way. Nothing is as solid as I believed. After that voicemail, I couldn't look at Daniel the same way. I didn't accuse him right away. Instead, I began paying attention in ways I never had before. He thought I wasn't noticing, but I watched him carefully. How often he left the house, how quickly he reached for his phone, the change in his expressions when certain messages came through. He still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, but there was something hollow in the gesture. He started mentioning work dinners more often. Some weeks it was twice, other weeks even more. He'd come home late, loosen his tie at the door, and tell me it was just another long meeting. His shirt sometimes smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, but he brushed past my questions with the same practiced answers. Late deadlines, company clients, traffic. His explanations rolled off his tongue too smoothly, as if rehearsed. I finally gave in to the gnawing in my chest and looked through his call history. My hands trembled as I scrolled. There it was, Rachel's number, over and over, always late at night. Sometimes at 2 in the morning, sometimes just before dawn. These weren't quick check-ins. Some lasted nearly an hour. I stared at the screen so long the numbers blurred, the phone heavy in my grip. It was the confirmation I feared, but seeing it in black and white felt like a punch to the ribs. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know without any doubt. One evening, when Daniel said he was running out to meet a colleague for dinner, I told him I needed to pick up a few things from the store. As soon as he drove off, I followed. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the traffic around me. I kept a careful distance, headlights dimmed, palms sweating on the steering wheel. He didn't go to a restaurant. He didn't head toward the office either. Instead, he pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind a closed bookstore. My breath caught when another car rolled in a few minutes later. Even in the dark, I recognized it instantly, Rachel's. I parked farther back where shadows hid me. My whole body felt like stone as I watched him step out and walk straight to her. He didn't hesitate. She opened her door, slid out, and went straight into his arms. They stood there like lovers, not friends. Then he kissed her. It wasn't quick or uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that belongs to people who know each other intimately. The sight tore something inside me. My throat closed and tears burned, but I stayed quiet, frozen in my seat. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to run at them, to rip them apart. But I couldn't move. I sat there, hidden in the dark, watching the two people I trusted most betray me in the open. Every second felt like an eternity. Their laughter carried through the air, muffled but clear enough to slice through me. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, biting my lip until I tasted blood, forcing myself not to sob. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, something else started to stir. Bigger. It burned low at first, like a coal deep in my chest, but as I sat there, trembling, it spread. Every kiss they shared, every smile they exchanged, every second I wasted loving a man who could do this. It all fueled the fire. I still hurt, but the tears on my cheeks weren't just sadness anymore. They were rage, thick and hot. I stayed until they finally left, each driving off in opposite directions, as if that could disguise what I had seen. I didn't chase them. I didn't call. I simply sat in the dark lot, shaking, staring at the empty spaces where their cars had been. My heart was shattered, but my resolve was forming. That night I realized I could never go back. The woman I had been, The trusting wife, the loyal friend, died in that parking lot. And something colder, stronger began to take her place. I couldn't go straight to Daniel. The thought of looking him in the eye, of hearing whatever excuse he'd come up with, made my stomach twist. Instead, I turned my attention to Rachel. If I was going to hear the truth, I wanted it from her lips. I called her the next afternoon and asked if she wanted to grab coffee. My voice sounded steady, but my chest ached the whole time. She agreed without hesitation, cheerful as always. When I met her at the little cafe we'd been going to since college, she waved at me like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't carrying the weight of my marriage on her shoulders. We ordered lattes and sat at our usual table by the window. She asked about the kids, about my job, about the new curtains I'd been planning to buy. I forced myself to smile, nodding, answering her questions as if nothing in my life had changed. But every word she spoke felt sharp, cutting into me. I decided to test her. I brought up Daniel casually at first. I said he'd been busy, working long hours, traveling more than usual. She kept her tone light, but her eyes flickered just enough for me to notice. I pressed further, joking that sometimes I wondered if he was having an affair. She laughed too loud and called me paranoid. That laugh didn't sound real. It was strained, almost rehearsed. The anger inside me built until I couldn't pretend anymore. I leaned closer, lowered my voice, and asked the question I'd been holding back. "Are you sleeping with my husband?" For a moment she froze. Her smile vanished, her fingers tightened around her cup. She shook her head quickly, denying it, saying she would never do that to me. But the longer I stared at her, the weaker her denial became. Her eyes dropped to the table. Her voice faltered. Finally, in a whisper so soft I almost didn't hear it, she admitted, "Yes." My body went cold. I felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. She rushed to speak, insisting she never wanted to hurt me, that it just happened, that she didn't mean for things to go so far. She talked about feelings, about confusion, about how much she still cared for me as a friend. Each word made me sicker than the last. I sat there, staring at the woman I once trusted with everything, wondering how she could sit across from me and ask for understanding. The betrayal in her eyes was unbearable, not because she was guilty, but because she looked like she expected forgiveness. When I didn't answer, she reached across the table and touched my hand. "Please don't let this ruin us," she whispered. "You're my best friend. I don't want to lose you." Her words hit me harder than the confession itself. She was begging me to protect the very friendship she had already destroyed. The audacity of it made my stomach turn. I yanked my hand away, disgust rising like bile. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She wanted me to promise I wouldn't tell anyone, to swear I'd keep her secret so her life wouldn't fall apart. She wanted me to carry her shame for her. But all I could feel was fury. Fury at her nerve, fury at her selfishness, fury that she thought our friendship was worth saving after she ripped my marriage apart. I left her sitting there with her untouched coffee, her lips pressed together, her eyes pleading. I didn't look back. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face and I realized I wasn't just betrayed, I was burning. I waited until the house was quiet, until the kids were asleep and there were no distractions between us. Daniel was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone when I walked in and stood in front of him. My voice didn't shake when I said his name, but inside my chest felt like it might split open. "I know," I told him. Just 2 words, but they made him glance up fast, his expression changing from relaxed to guarded in an instant. He asked what I meant, tried to act confused, but I didn't give him room to twist it. I told him I knew about Rachel. At first he laughed like it was ridiculous. He shook his head, said I was imagining things, said I was reading too much into nothing. His face was calm, his tone smooth, but his eyes darted toward the floor. I pressed harder, not backing down. The denial started to crack. That's when he turned it on me. He raised his voice, accusing me of being distant, saying I cared more about the children than about him. He claimed I barely paid attention to him anymore, that he felt invisible in his own house. Each word felt like a slap, as if the blame for his choices belonged to me. I stood there in shock, but he wasn't done. He said it wasn't what I thought, that it wasn't physical, that it was just an emotional connection. He spoke as though that should soften the betrayal, as though whispering love to someone else was harmless if there weren't hands involved. His words twisted the knife deeper, the way he tried to make me question the severity of what he'd done. But I wouldn't let him rewrite it. I demanded the truth, all of it. My voice rose until the kids stirred upstairs, and still I pushed. I told him I deserved more than half-truths and excuses. Finally, his shoulders slumped, his mask slipped, and he admitted it. Almost a year. That's how long it had been. Almost 12 months of lies, of dinners that weren't dinners, of phone calls in the middle of the night. Nearly a year of pretending to be my husband while sharing himself with someone else. The words crushed me. I felt the floor tilt under my feet, the walls pressing in. It wasn't a slip, it wasn't a mistake. It was a life he'd been living in parallel to ours. A secret existence while I folded laundry, cooked dinners, kissed him goodnight. He tried to soften it again, saying he hadn't meant for it to happen, that he still loved me, that he was confused. But none of it mattered. The damage was done. Every sentence only made the weight heavier, pressing down on my chest until it hurt to breathe. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the man I married, not the father of my children, but a stranger who had taken up residence in my home. Someone who had been lying with every smile, every touch, every empty reassurance. That night something inside me broke completely. The pieces of the life I thought I had were gone, scattered beyond repair. My marriage, my trust, my faith in him, all of it shattered, leaving me standing in front of the ruins. Nights became unbearable. I would wait until the house was silent, until I heard the soft breathing of my children through their doors, and then I would slip into the bathroom, close the lock, and let everything out. I'd sit on the cold tile floor with a towel pressed to my face so no sound escaped. My tears came in waves that left me gasping, but I refused to let them hear me. To them, I needed to be steady, the same mother who tucked them in and promised them they were safe. Sleep refused to come. Even when my eyes burned from exhaustion, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I'd replay every conversation, every excuse, every smile that now felt false. My reflection in the mirror started to change. I barely recognized the woman staring back. The dark circles under my eyes, the dullness where there used to be warmth. It felt like my worth had drained out, like I had failed as a wife, as a friend, as someone who should have seen what was happening right in front of her. I thought back to all the times I had defended Daniel. When friends hinted he worked too much, I had smiled and said he was dedicated, that he was building a future for us. When Rachel once teased me about him being charming to other women, I had brushed it off, saying he only had eyes for me. I had been his shield, protecting him from suspicion, convincing myself that loyalty was love. And Rachel, God, Rachel. I had poured my heart into her, confided in her when I felt insecure, told her my fears about not being good enough. She had nodded, comforted me, hugged me. And all the while she was keeping the darkest secret of all. The shame settled heavy in my chest. How could I have been so blind? I questioned every choice, every instinct, until it felt like I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. I was sinking and I didn't know if I could pull myself back up. But somewhere in those endless nights something shifted. The tears didn't stop, but they started to feel different. Instead of weakness, there was heat behind them. Instead of collapse, there was a pulse of something harder, sharper. I began to feel it when I remembered Rachel's face in the cafe, begging me not to ruin our friendship, as if I was the one who might break something precious. I felt it when I replayed Daniel's words, blaming me for his choices, claiming he was lonely. The longer I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't my shame to carry. This wasn't my burden. They had chosen lies and they had treated my love as disposable. The grief was still there, raw and heavy, but beneath it anger began to build. Not the kind that makes you lash out blindly, but the kind that grows roots deep inside. A steady, burning determination not to let them define me, not to let their betrayal be the end of my story. I realized then that I couldn't keep falling apart behind a locked bathroom door. I couldn't keep drowning in their choices while they went on living theirs. I had to rise, even if I had to do it piece by broken piece. My tears would still come, but now each one felt less like surrender and more like fuel. I was no longer just mourning what I lost. I was beginning to plan how I would take back what was mine. My strength, my dignity, my life. The idea of walking away quietly never sat right with me. Leaving would have been easier, but easy wasn't what they deserved. They had built their lies carefully, thinking they could get away with it. If they believed their betrayal would stay hidden, then I wanted the opposite. I wanted the truth laid bare where everyone they loved could see it. I began gathering what I needed. Whenever Daniel left his phone unattended, I scrolled quickly, saving screenshots of his late-night messages. The records showed a trail of contact between them that no one could deny. I printed call logs, highlighted the times that matched the nights he had told me he was working. On my own phone, I started a folder that grew heavier each day with photos, files, and evidence that painted the real picture of their relationship. One evening, I parked a few streets away from where Daniel claimed to be at a meeting. I watched as Rachel's car pulled up as he stepped inside as they drove off together. My hands shook when I lifted the camera, but I clicked the shutter anyway. The images weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. They showed enough, him entering her car, the two of them leaning close. Proof. Still, evidence alone wasn't enough. I wanted protection too. Quietly, I reached out to a lawyer, someone recommended by a woman at my office who had gone through her own painful separation. Sitting across from him in his polished office, I felt the weight of what I was doing. I told him everything, sliding the stack of documents across the desk. He nodded, calm and professional, laying out the steps I would need to secure myself and the children. Accounts to separate, property to protect, custody arrangements to prepare for. It wasn't just about punishing them, it was about making sure they couldn't take any more from me than they already had. With his guidance, I began moving pieces into place, slowly, carefully, so neither Daniel nor Rachel suspected a thing. But the part of me that still burned for justice needed more than paperwork. I didn't just want them exposed to me, I wanted them exposed to everyone who thought they were trustworthy. That was when the plan for the dinner came to me. A gathering, nothing unusual, just a friendly evening with family and close friends. The kind of thing I had hosted dozens of times before. I pictured them walking into our home, smiling, relaxed, expecting another night of laughter and wine. I pictured the moment when the room fell silent, when the truth unfolded in front of every pair of eyes they valued. That was the scene I wanted. No shadows, no hiding. I set the plan in motion casually, inviting relatives, neighbors, a few longtime friends. I extended the invitation to Rachel as well, my voice light, hiding the storm inside me. She accepted without hesitation. Daniel didn't question it either. To them it was just another evening. To me it was the stage for the reckoning. Every step I took felt calculated, each piece fitting into a puzzle only I could see. At night when I lay awake, the grief was still there, but now it shared space with something else. Resolve. For the first time since everything began, I felt like I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. And when the night came, they would finally understand the cost of what they had done. The night of the dinner arrived and everything looked ordinary on the surface. The table was set with candles and dishes I knew by heart, the smell of roast filling the air. Daniel's parents were the first to arrive, carrying a bottle of wine. His sister followed soon after, chatting about her new job. Friends from our circle came in smiling, ready for an evening of food and laughter. Rachel walked through the door in her usual confident way, hugging me like nothing was wrong. Daniel stood by my side, completely unaware of what I had planned. I moved through the evening like a hostess on autopilot, pouring drinks, offering appetizers, asking about work and kids. Laughter echoed, forks clinked against plates, the mood warm and easy. No one suspected that beneath my calm smile, my heart pounded with anticipation. It was halfway through the meal when I finally rose from my chair. The conversation quieted as I set my glass down and reached for my phone. I didn't look at Daniel or Rachel, I looked at everyone else. "There's something I need to share," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled slightly. I pressed play. The voicemail filled the room. A soft, intimate whisper. "I love you." The effect was instant. Forks froze in midair. Faces turned, confusion spreading as the sound sank in. Then came the silence, thick and suffocating. I let the words linger, then pressed pause. My eyes shifted to Rachel. Her face drained of color, her lips parting as though she might speak, but no words came. Before anyone could ask, I placed the stack of printed pages on the table. One by one I laid them out. Call logs with times circled, messages printed in black and white, photographs of them together where they thought no one was watching. Each piece hit the table like a hammer, the truth undeniable. Gasps filled the air. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He muttered something under his breath and moved toward the door, but his father's voice stopped him cold. "Sit down." It wasn't a request, it was an order. His mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rachel's composure shattered. She began to cry, reaching for me across the table, begging for a chance to explain. Her voice shook, but no one offered her comfort. Even her own brother, who had come with his wife, turned away from her, disgust clear on his face. Daniel's anger flared, but it looked hollow against the weight of the evidence spread before him. He muttered about mistakes, about being misunderstood, but his words carried no weight. Every eye in the room was on him, judging, condemning. The atmosphere shifted completely. Where moments before there had been laughter, now there was only tension and disappointment. I could see the faces of people who once admired him change as they realized what he had done. His parents humiliated. His sister furious. Friends shaking their heads, whispering. Rachel buried her face in her hands, sobbing. while Daniel shoved his plate aside and glared at me as though I was the one who had betrayed him. But it didn't matter. The truth was out and there was no going back. As I stood there watching the chaos unfold, a strange calm settled over me. For months, the lies had eaten away at me in secret. Now the deception was no longer mine to carry. Everyone could see it. Everyone could feel the weight of what they had done. Their reputations crumbled in that dining room. Whatever respect or affection had once surrounded them was gone. The families they had fooled now turned their backs. And in that moment, I allowed myself the smallest flicker of satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, but the bitter relief of justice finally being seen. When the night of the dinner ended, there was no more pretending. Daniel tried to follow me into the bedroom when everyone left, but I stopped him at the doorway. I told him he was no longer welcome under my roof. His face twisted with disbelief, then rage, but I didn't waver. I packed a bag with his clothes and set it by the front door. The man who once promised to protect me walked out without even looking back at his children asleep upstairs. The next morning I met with my lawyer again. The evidence I had carefully collected became the backbone of my case. He guided me through each step with precision. Bank accounts, property titles, custody filings. Piece by piece I untangled myself from Daniel, making sure he could not drag me down with him. The process was painful, but for the first time I felt the ground under me steadying. When the court date arrived, I stood tall. Daniel tried to fight for partial custody, tried to paint himself as a devoted father. But the documents told a different story. Long absences, questionable expenses, nights away from home. The judge saw through him. I was granted primary custody of Emily and Noah, along with the support necessary to keep our lives stable. The victory wasn't sweet. It was necessary. As for Rachel, the fallout came quickly. Her own husband, who had once been kind to me at gatherings, filed his own divorce petition within weeks. Her family, who had treated me like one of their own, no longer answered her calls. Friends she had known for years turned cold. One by one, the bridges she thought would always stand began to collapse. She tried reaching out to me, emails filled with apologies, but I never responded. Her silence now is the only thing I want from her. Daniel's downfall was slower but no less sharp. Without the home we built, he moved into a cramped apartment on the other side of town. The man who once walked with confidence now struggled with overdue bills and empty cupboards. He had spent years building an image of success, but with his secrets out, that image cracked. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he complained about money, about loneliness, about how quickly everything had turned against him. He had chosen this path and now he walked it alone. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild. Not overnight, not without scars, but with determination. I rearranged the house, moving furniture, painting walls, making it ours again. The children noticed the difference. They clung to me, asked questions, sometimes cried. I gave them honesty but also reassurance that we would be okay. Slowly, the heaviness in our home lifted, replaced by routines that belonged to us three alone. I learned to carry myself differently too. I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had faced betrayal head-on and refused to be destroyed by it. I went back to hobbies I had abandoned, took long walks with the kids, cooked meals that filled the kitchen with warmth. Nights were still hard sometimes, but they no longer broke me. Daniel and Rachel had tried to take something from me that was irreplaceable. Instead, I found pieces of myself I didn't know were still there. Strength I thought I had lost came back, not in loud declarations, but in quiet steps forward each day. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living, on my own terms, with my children by my side, and with a heart no longer tied to people who had proven unworthy of it. Looking back now, it feels like I lived through a storm that ripped apart everything I thought was secure. For a long time, I believed the destruction would swallow me whole. The betrayal cut so deep that I wondered if I'd ever breathe without pain again. But standing here on the other side, I see it differently. What nearly broke me also forced me to uncover a strength I had been too blind to recognize. I no longer lie awake wondering what I could have done differently. I don't carry the weight of his decisions or her betrayal as if they were my responsibility. Daniel chose deception. Rachel chose disloyalty. Those choices were never mine to own, and they no longer live on my shoulders. What I came to realize was that revenge, as satisfying as it was in that moment of exposure, was only part of the story. Laying their secrets bare wasn't just about punishing them. It was about claiming back the pieces of myself they thought they had taken. My dignity, my confidence, my sense of worth. The evidence, the silence in that room, the way their masks fell. It wasn't simply justice for me. It was proof that my voice still mattered, that I wasn't powerless. The real victory was rediscovering who I was without them. The woman who had been buried under years of excuses and doubt rose again, not perfect, not untouched, but whole in a new way. Scars, yes. Pain that still lingers at the edges, yes. But with those marks came resilience I didn't know I had. One evening, as I tucked Emily and Noah into bed, I sat with them a little longer. They asked me if things would ever go back to how they used to be. I told them no, but I promised them something better. I told them I would always choose truth for them even when it hurt, that I would always stand on loyalty even when it was difficult, that no matter what, they would never have to question where they stood with me. Their eyes softened, their small hands holding mine, and in that moment, I felt the future opening ahead of us. Walking through my house now, I feel both the emptiness left behind and the freedom that came with it. I am not the woman who stayed quiet. I am not the woman who accepted half-truths. I am the woman who stood even when her world crumbled and built something new from the rubble. And so I move forward. Not unscarred but unafraid. Not untouched by betrayal but no longer defined by it. Each step carries both the pain of what was lost and the strength of what I reclaimed. I walk into my new life free of lies, carrying both scars and strength. Do you think I was right to walk away from both of them, or should I have tried to forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories.